Okay, welcome back to What If History Restarted. It's episode 62. Last time we saw some stuff happen in the Americas and in Africa. So this is probably going to be focused on Europe, Asia, and Oceania. This video might not be as long because I have barely any time to record it, but yeah. So anyway, we're just going to get into things now. Because over here we still have, of course, the rivalry going on between the Cross and Octagon alliances, but more specifically Golden Horde and Baikal. Cross alliance is mostly over here, and the Octagons are mostly over here, but they are not getting along too well. The thing is, Baikal has direct sea access right over here, and I mean obviously also up here and over here. Most of that is just like ice. And if you look at Golden Horde, they also have direct sea access, but only up here, and that's all ice. So they might as well be landlocked, actually. Now, that isn't too big of a deal, because they can still go through here, through the blue team, who is their ally. They can also go through these guys who are their ally, or over here, because those are their allies. But all of that still requires a lot of navigating through straits. They have to go through the Danish Strait over here, and Denmark is not their ally. And then over here they have to go through the Strait of Marmara and the Sea of Marmara. What's the strait called? I kind of forget. But that is in between two countries that are not their allies. And once again, they would then have to go through the Suez, which is not owned by their allies, or through Gibraltar, which, believe it or not, is not their ally. So basically they are kind of landlocked, and that they would like to change that. And, there's one particularly easy way to do it, which would probably be through either the Lime Country or the Golden Country down here. Both of them border the Indian Ocean, although this one is very far up the Persian Gulf, so they still have to go through Oman, who doesn't like them. But this one over here just goes straight down to the ocean, so that could work out pretty well for them. So these guys don't really even offer an explanation as to why they're invading. They just say that they need to do this as a special military operation. And pretty quickly, Baikal's troops start rolling down, or not Baikal, Golden Horde's troops start rolling down in here. And this is going pretty well. The terrain here is slightly difficult to traverse, so it is not completely easy, but eventually they capture that major city, and getting pretty close to the capital, and have this major city isolated over here. However, this country is not alone. Now, they are not in any military alliances, but they are in an economic alliance, and some of their partners, particularly over, just in the Persia area, are pretty close allies with them. And not wanting to get invaded by Baikal soon, because, they are very close to it, where they're invading right now, and since they didn't offer any explanation as to why they're invading it, for all these countries know, they could be next. So we're going to see quite a few countries come to this country's side. First of all, we have this white one over here, which is very light. Yeah, who would have guessed white is very light. But these guys actually do manage to take a major city, so good for them. We then have this green country over here. We could probably make that a little lighter. They start moving in here and even connect up to the Caspian. They do have a battle for this major city, but Golden Horde is able to push them back. And other than that, they probably also have these two countries joining in and just supporting the others. So yeah. Basically, it's all of, let's get a different color, it's all of these guys down here. This one considers it, but decides not to, because they're kind of worthless, so, why, they don't really think they would ever be invaded, because they have, literally nothing to offer. So, yeah, and they invade the Aral Sea. But anyway, with this new, burst over here, it's a little more difficult for Golden Horde, because now they have they have way more to fight against than they initially assumed. And so pretty quickly they get pushed all the way out of this country, and they even now begin to lose land to this country, as we now see a pretty big front line appear in the south of their country. However, obviously they weren't using all their military, but they are now going to have to use all of their military to its full extent, and with that, the war shouldn't be as terrible, as they immediately managed to recapture this major city, and most of this country's claims, well, progression, I guess. They then move into its little panhandle, which goes pretty easily, and then they just make a nice little spearhead down to the capital, which also goes very well. This country was not very well prepared for this. With that, its entire, front line collapses, so, yeah. You then move down here and begin to help push out this country. Well, not help, but to actually push them out. Let's do this. No, actually, I guess this is fine. And, yeah, they managed to recapture this major city, and they also push back these guys, so they now have all their major cities back. These guys now start sending out, a whole other wave of troops, which kind of manages to, stabilize the front lines, other than in this country, though, because they have completely collapsed, and they're really just being held on to now by, these two countries, so we're just going to do this to show that it's occupied. And so, things are a little stalematy here, because the Golden Horde doesn't want to throw down too many troops to leave themselves vulnerable to, the Octagon Alliance, because they definitely don't trust them, and if they have all their troops down here, that's going to be a bit of an issue when these guys come storming in here. So they aren't, actually sending down, all of their military, and because of that, it actually ends up being kind of a stalemate down here, although they do manage to make a tiny bit more progress over, a couple months. And so, eventually, they're going to have to come to a peace treaty with these countries, and yeah, they definitely aren't going to have sea access down here, so that was the entire point of the war, and it didn't work out for them. But anyway, they are going to be fully annexing this country, although actually, well, hold on, we gotta make its capital major city first. Although some of the areas would probably join up with this country, some of the areas that these guys are occupying at least. Over here, they're going to get a decent chunk of land from this country, but definitely far from all of it, and definitely far from the sea. Gonna do that. And over here, this country is more interesting, because they're going to be gaining some land over here, but they gain this little panhandle sort of thing. They actually lose a tiny strip of land up here. So, yeah. With that, this is our new map of Baikal. I keep calling it Baikal. This is Baikal. But yeah, Golden Horde is looking pretty good now, but they still don't have sea access, like I said, which was kind of the whole point of that war, so that's not too great for them, and their population is kind of unhappy with that, but Baikal is very happy with that, and you can't really see the smiley face, but there is one. Anyways, following this, we do also need to update the alliance layer, so wha-bam, no, wha-bam, bam, probably make this country's one smaller, and then we just bring these over. Anyways, with that act of aggression by Golden Horde, some of the neighboring countries over here are a little bit more afraid of them now, and that is going to, yes, there we go. That is going to convince this Himalayan country down here to actually join up with the Octagon Alliance, which is Baikal's alliance, and so it's not good for these guys. You can now see that the boundary between the two halves is starting to actually get better defined, with it now going all the, you can now see that it goes all the way like this, but so now it's just up to what these countries do. Maybe this one, if this country joins the Octagon Alliance, and so does Oman, then it would be like this. If these guys both join the Cross Alliance, it could be like this, but then India throws it for a loop, and yeah, it could go a lot of directions. This northern bit is the decided upon part. Yes. Anyway, speaking of alliances, over here, the blue team is kind of, under scrutiny from the rest of the Circle Economic Alliance, because, they definitely did not support these countries in their war effort, while these guys were giving them a lot of funding and donations and equipment and all that. And that's because, as you can see, the blue team is in both the Circle and the Cross Alliance, which is, a little bit awkward here. And eventually, both the Circle Alliance members and the other Cross Alliance members are going to go to blue team and say that they have to choose one side or the other. And the blue team is going to choose the Cross Alliance, as they have definitely grown more distant towards the Circle Alliance. I mean, the red team has been like their biggest enemy throughout all history, even if it has a completely new government now. But, people are kind of stupid. Anyway, that's done now, and the Circle Alliance is a little bit not doing so well. And it's going to actually kind of cause some countries to lose faith in it. And so we're actually going to see these two countries up here, the two Anatolian countries, are both going to leave it. So yeah, Circle Alliance is kind of crumbling. They do have India. Let's go. Anyway, we'll go down to Oceania now. And to be honest with you, I kind of forget the story for what's happened over here. All I remember is that these two guys don't like each other. But we're going to say that over here, this country is not doing too great, as its government is kind of terrible, and they're very bad at funding and distributing stuff. That's probably the better term. So yeah, with this country's government kind of being very stupid and not being able to distribute a lot of their goods to the areas in the south, because the capital's up here and they just are very bad at distributing it down to the south, because that's across from the country. We're going to see a large southern area declare independence. All of this, including this major city. And yeah, it's not too great for these guys. We do gotta make that a capital. Is that even a capital? Yes, it is. It capital? I feel like that's not a capital. No, it is. I'm going insane. Okay, but yeah, as you can see, the purple country, the original purple Borneo country, is not doing too great over here. And it's going to kind of get to a point where the green Borneo country is going to see this as a great opportunity to do some invasion. And so that is... alright. That is what they're going to do, as they pretty much immediately go out here and capture its capital. And yeah. They get some funding from Papua New Guinea. I forgot how to say that for a second. And in exchange, they promised them this little bit of land down here because, it's access, or well, control over a strait for these guys. And so with the support from Papua New Guinea, I just can't say that today for some reason, the purple team, which has already been, crumbling, is pretty quick to fall. And so the green team is going to become the new main country over here in Borneo. Although they are still missing, the southern half down here, as well as this little northern tip. They don't really care about that. And also they are now missing this little peninsula thing, because now it is Papua New Guinea's. And yeah. Anyway, moving down here to Australia, the Tuscany's doing a pretty good job at controlling their part, because they're the strongest country in the world. But Gibraltar is kind of not doing so good, because a lot of these indigenous people want their independence. And it's pretty Europeanified, because obviously in our world, most people in Australia are of English descent, or at least just European descent. And there's not that many Aboriginals. But over here in this timeline, there's definitely a lot more Aboriginals. It's probably pretty split. There's probably a little bit more Europeans, but it's not outnumbered by that many. And I believe if we look on the religion layer, yeah, it's kind of formed like its own identity because it's like a good mix of Aboriginals and Europeans. But Tuscany's doing a good job because they're the strongest country in the world and actually have a competent government. But over here, Gibraltar is not doing as great as managing their part, and it's going to lead to some rebellions, primarily down in the south over here. That it looks too much like the ocean. And yeah, these guys, this rebellion starts getting very out of hand to the point where like Gibraltar kind of just gives up. So they stop. They don't even bother sending over any troops. So they're just like tell their colony government to try and do their best, but that doesn't work out too well. Tuscany actually starts trying to like send in their supplies from their colony, which does actually go decently well. However, it is definitely not good enough to fully get these guys out. Like, if Tuscany really wanted to, they could send over their actual troops from their mainland and from their African colony, but they don't care that much. So pretty quickly, these guys are going to manage. I don't know why I made the brush so small. But yeah, pretty quickly, these guys manage to get up here to what is probably the biggest city in this colony, and they kill the colony, the governor or whatever he would be called. And with that, they kind of are like, well, they probably won't kill him, but they take him hostage, and they say that they'll kill him if they don't get their independence. And so finally, Gibraltar is going to agree to that. And so we can now look at the new borders of this new country, which I guess doesn't make them new borders since they're the only borders. Bam, that looks bad. There would probably be a straight line here, because, like, literally, what would you make this? How would you define the border in Australia? Because there is, like, it's the outback, man. It's really not going to be a lot to do there. Wow. But yeah. Trump. Obviously, like, this probably doesn't make sense since, like, literally where would this line be going through? But, just pretend it does. And yeah, that is now the southern tip country down here with their independence and their new capital. And that is going to trigger the rest of the colony to declare its independence. Yeah. These guys were more like a rebellion of the indigenous population, while these guys are actually more of the European people, but they kind of just don't want to be under the control of Gibraltar anymore, so they're just going to straight up declare independence and make themselves, whoa, that is not good, make themselves a new country. I guess we'll go with that. Yes, that is them. So that's pretty good for these guys, and their capital should probably be over here. I don't know why it's like more inland. That doesn't really make sense. The outback. It's gonna make it more realistic here. Sure. There is some people up here that would. There's like 5 people that live up here, but like those 5 people would rather be part of Tuscany's colony. So we do actually see that a decent amount of land is going to go over to the Tuscan colony because those guys just wanted to be there instead. In any way, Australia doesn't really have a lot of major cities, so let's change that real quick, because that is kind of stupid. Bam, bam, bam. I'm sure these major cities down here that are across the entire outback will be very willing to stay in this same country. That may or may not be foreshadowing, even though it's very obviously foreshadowing, because obviously these guys are gonna rebel, but not this episode. That seems like a stupid place for a city. And yeah, I think that's probably... We'll put some in New Zealand because they don't have any yet. How's there a major city out there? That does not seem right. But oh well. How long has this episode been? 19 minutes. We should probably do one more event because, like I said, I am seriously running out of time to make this video. Eeny, meeny, miny, mo. Well, we haven't done anything in Europe yet. The alliance layer is kind of annoying to look at, so let's just turn that off. But over here in Europe, the we have a few different alliances. We have economic alliances, being the Square and Cross Alliance, and then we have a military alliance, being the Diamond Alliance. The Diamond Alliance, or actually that's a hexagon, I'm stupid. But the Hexagon Alliance is like kind of the successor to the, what was it, I think it was the Star Alliance. That was the losing team in World War One. So they're pretty similar to that, but that alliance is prohibited from existing again due to that treaty. So unfortunately, the strongest country that was kind of the leader of that alliance, Austria, is not allowed back in. So they're kind of forced to be unaligned. But yeah, only unaligned countries in Europe are these guys. This tiny little country down here, this English country, and these like far north countries. Finland, I don't even know what you would call this one, and I also don't know what you would call that one. So most countries over here are aligned in the square, well, the Square and the Cross Alliance. Wow. The Square Economic Alliance and the Cross Economic Alliance were once the same alliance, but then the Crosses broke off because Golden Horde and Tuscany were kind of feuding over, their influence spheres. So, you can kind of say it's a three-way rivalry right now between Tuscany, Golden Horde, and Baikal. But Tuscany's and the rest of the Square Alliance are definitely a little bit more neutral, while these guys are at each other's throats. But, yeah. So, because there's very few unaligned countries, things are very tense for those unaligned countries, because they are completely surrounded by possible enemies. Now, Austria is prohibited from joining the Hexagon Alliance. They would rather die than join the Square Alliance, as one of their former allies, Denmark, has done. They probably don't like Denmark anymore, even though they're like besties for the whole series. And the Cross Alliance doesn't really have any appeal to them because they don't care about these countries. So they're kind of stuck here, which is very frightening because the rest of the Square Alliance still does not like them, particularly Tuscany, since they're literally like big enemies for like probably solid like 1,500 years, 1,500 years. So these guys are actually still very strong, especially in terms of economy, but they're a little bit lacking in military, and honestly, in a one-on-one war with Tuscany, they would get obliterated, and in a war against the entire Square Alliance, they would just be dead then. So, they are going to start investing a little bit more in their military, which is going to make some of the surrounding countries a little bit nervous, but so far they do not do anything. I just wanted to see how that would look, but, yeah, so far these guys don't do anything, but they just build up their military by a lot, and they actually begin to get kind of strong again. Over here, the English country is kind of good allies with both Ireland and Scotland. I wouldn't say, well, not like allies, but they're on good terms with them, and they definitely wouldn't, like, invade each other. Their only real concern right now is Tuscany and arguably Denmark. They are a little bit afraid, but they don't really they probably aren't really valuable enough for Tuscany to invade, and they honestly could probably, like, in a war against Denmark, it probably would just end up in a stalemate because they don't border each other by land. So it would just be a long naval battle. So they aren't really particularly concerned with Denmark. However, they are looking to maybe join an alliance because they still don't want to run the risk of getting invaded by either of these countries. So they kind of have to, well, they're kind of in a weird spot now because they're good allies with both, let's get this right, with both of the two they're allies with countries that are in both of the main European alliances. But eventually they're actually going to join the Hexagon Alliance. I accidentally made a city. It's not, there we go. So that's one less unaligned country now. These guys, and they join up with the Hexagon Alliance, as I just said, which makes Denmark and Tuscany and the rest of the Square Alliance pretty upset, but it's not that big of a loss. Up here, these guys have been under a lot of pressure to join the Cross Alliance because, well, all these two countries over here are, well, I should say, these three countries, WICSO are definitely good allies, and Estonia is kind of there, but like it's like they're not as good of allies, but they still are allies. But yeah, eventually, they are going to join the Cross Alliance, mostly because of these two countries convincing them. And finally, we are going to have one country join the Square Alliance, that being this small little Norwegian guy. So with that, all three, why is that there? But yeah, with that, all three European alliances have grown by one member. So, great job, guys. Now the only unaligned countries are this country, which is still doing nothing, and Austria, who is now actually becoming pretty powerful. Oh, and also these guys, but no one really cares about them because they wouldn't help anyone. But in other news, this country over here, the light blue team, is a little bit less willing to be in the Square Alliance because they are definitely the closest thing to a successor to that Bulgarian Empire that existed like pre-World War One, like something along the lines of this. And yeah, they're definitely like the closest thing to being a successor, and most of their people are still holding a grudge against the rest of the Square Alliance. So it's going to get to a point where they actually are going to decide to switch sides and go over to the Cross Alliance here. Blam. Sure. And yeah, with that change in alliances, that is going to be the end of this episode. So there is the new map.